At the start of this meeting, it was announced that the intention was to create an ecosystem of people to come together to manage the problems facing the planet. I'm going to talk about ecosystems in a very different sense, the scientific sense, which is the systems that we all depend on, the way the planet operates, the temperatures, the rainfall. Everything that the planet yields for us is our ecosystem, and of course we are a part of that ecosystem. And I don't believe we have a system at the moment that acknowledges the importance of the ecosystems. I was a professor of chemistry and head of the chemistry department at Cambridge University when I received the invitation from Tony Blair to join his government as chief scientific advisor in the year 2000. I moved into government and I spent 8 years doing that job. The only reason I took that position was because I was so concerned about what was happening on climate change. I do believe that this is a very big existential challenge to humanity. That doesn't mean that humanity would be entirely wiped out, but it is likely that our civilization would not survive unless we actually take crucial decisions to manage the future for humanity. And so moving in with Tony Blair, I was then in a position to raise the profile of British action on this, and I believe we were extremely successful. I give you one figure. Britain has now reduced its emissions compared with 1990 by 48%. And we have this pathway to take us to absolute reduction in emissions of 80% by 2050. However, the rest of the world has not delivered on that. So where we are today, whereas in 2010 even, there was a chance that just reducing emissions would manage the problem, today I can't say that. We really have got too far on in emitting greenhouse gases. Today, we're at 500 parts per million. The pre-industrial level was 275 parts per million. This is really like putting another duvet on your bed at night and hoping that it wouldn't make any difference to you. Of course it's getting hotter, and of course ice is melting, and of course sea levels are going up. All of these impacts are now being felt, and it felt in such a way that we have extreme weather events occurring right round the world. I give you as my example of this what has happened, for example, in North America in 2021, an extreme heat wave right down the west coast of North America. Now that heat wave was attributable to what's happening in the North Pole region, and I'm going to come and explain that in a few words. But what that meant was temperature rises were in excess, not by 0.1 degrees centigrade of the previous record temperature, but by 5 to 10 degrees centigrade. Up in British Columbia, temperatures of 49.6 degrees centigrade observed, and over a 3-week period. We're not talking about just a chance event. All of this can be attributable to what's happening in the North Pole region. In other words, what happens in the Arctic Circle is impacting the whole world. Let me try and explain. For example, Greenland, and this is a Nature paper that's just been published, is losing ice at the rate of, and let me just check so that I get this exactly right, of 30 million tons per hour of ice. And it is, over the last 38 years, it's lost 1 trillion metric tons of ice. Now what that means is all that ice goes into the ocean, sea levels rise. When all of Greenland ice has melted, sea levels globally on average will have risen by 7.5 meters. So what we see is that we have this amazing threat to every city on our coastlines. There's no city that could possibly survive a sea level rise of that kind. In fact, even a couple of meters, a meter or two. If we take several of the global cities, I would put New York up there, but I would also put several Indian cities. In Indonesia, Jakarta is already in the north region of the city under seawater right round the year. So what we see is global cities will go underwater. They will not be manageable due to even an earlier sea level rise. We're also estimating, for example, that by mid-century, that's 2050, not long from now, 85% of the landmass of Vietnam will be under seawater at least once a year. That's the world's third biggest rice producer. They put rice into the global market. Where are the other rice producers? Indonesia, same story. Paddy fields very close to sea level. Southeast China, same story. Paddy fields very close to sea level. We're looking at a potential rice loss which would be damaging to the entire planet. Now, let me come back to what's happening in the North Pole region. Not only is Greenland losing ice at this devastating rate, but we can also see that the permafrost is beginning to lose methane that is trapped in the permafrost as a molecule, methane hydrate, but that methane hydrate is decomposing, creating large bubbles of methane which are released explosively into the air. There's enough methane there that if it was all emitted over a 2-decade period, global temperatures would rise by 5 to 8 degrees centigrade. So what we're talking about is a series of challenges that are on their way. It does look as if Greenland ice is melting irreversibly without human intervention. Now, the good part of my story is that we can still manage the problem. The Climate Crisis Advisory Group that I set up just 2.5 years ago has published 20 reports. It is composed of 15 individuals from 11 countries, each one of them a leading climate scientist recognized by all. And what we're saying is we can manage our future, but it's no longer possible only with deep and rapid emissions reduction. We must reduce our dependence on fossil fuels much more quickly than we have been, but we also must learn how to capture the excess gases that we've already put up into the atmosphere. We've put up so much that we're at 500 parts per million now. We have to bring it down to 350 parts per million to have a manageable future. We probably won't manage that for the next 50 years, and we probably won't manage to unhook our dependence on fossil fuels that quickly. So we also need to buy time, and we therefore need to learn how to, for example, refreeze the Arctic. How can we keep the Arctic Sea covered with ice that is covered with ice still in the Arctic winter? If we can keep that ice over the North Pole region, covering the Arctic Sea during the summer, then we can reflect sunlight back into space and begin to cool the planet down. So that is one important exercise for the scientists. Can we really manage to do that and do it quickly so that we buy time for the rest of the program? Now let me just finish by coming back to ecosystems. What we know is our dependence on these ecosystems is crucial. And yet we have an economic system that puts no value on our ecosystems. I'm going to just tell you, China has introduced an important concept. The concept is eco-civilization. They've put it into the constitution of the Communist Party and the constitution of the government. And eco-civilization is defined as managing ecosystems with equal importance to managing human well-being. Now, no country is achieving that, but of course, what every country has to do is achieve that. We need a philosophical and economic revolution so that we can understand we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature.